The young maid Beatrice never imagined that she would become so deeply involved with the millionaire Jason. Despite her mixed feelings, she always remembered her role as a housemaid. However, everything changes when Beatrice uncovers a shocking secret that forces her to stop Jason from embarking on an important business trip. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Beatrice, a 23-year-old young woman, had been working for just a few months at Dennis's mansion, a mysterious man. The imposing residence, with its tall walls and enormous windows, was a labyrinth of luxury and secrets. Beatrice spent her days cleaning the numerous rooms, always with the feeling that the walls held more stories than she would ever know. The other employees, like Beatrice, had no idea about the line of business Dennis was involved in. All they knew was that he frequently received equally enigmatic visitors for meetings in his office on the ground floor. The room, always locked tight, was forbidden territory for the employees, except when they were called to serve coffee or clean quickly. The parties at the mansion were another mystery altogether. Dennis used to dismiss the usual staff on these days, bringing in an external team for the services. The day after these celebrations was always a nightmare for Beatrice and her colleagues. The house would be in complete chaos. Bottles of drinks scattered everywhere, furniture out of place, clogged bathrooms, and overturned rooms. The smell of alcohol and smoke permeated the air, and although no one knew for sure what happened on those nights, it was evident that the excesses went far beyond the acceptable. Working for Dennis was far from Beatrice's dream job. The long working hours, the mysterious environment, and the constant tension in the air were exhausting. Nevertheless, it was this job that allowed her to pay the bills and, more importantly, finance her evening barista course. Every night after a grueling day at the mansion, Beatrice would head to the culinary school, where she learned the art of preparing various types of coffee. It was in these classes that she found an escape, dreaming of the day she could open her own coffee shop. One morning, Dennis called Beatrice to his office. Her heart raced, as employees were rarely summoned to this restricted space. "Beatrice, please prepare the large guest room at the end of the hall," Dennis said in his deep, authoritative voice. "My nephew Jason is coming to stay with me for a while. Buy whatever is necessary. I want him to feel welcome." The news caught Beatrice by surprise. Despite the constant movement of people in the mansion, she had never heard of any of Dennis's relatives. Her mind immediately imagined a child, perhaps a 10 or 12-year-old boy. Enthusiastically, she set about preparing the room, choosing sheets with children's character prints, buying some candies, and even selecting toys to put in a basket in the corner of the room. On the day of Jason's arrival, Beatrice was eager to meet the little guest. She heard the sound of a car approaching and ran to the kitchen window, curious. To her complete surprise, the person who got out of the vehicle was not a child, but a young man, probably in his mid-20s. "My dear nephew Jason, how you've grown!" exclaimed Dennis, hugging the newcomer. "It's been about 10 years since I last saw you. My sister finally allowed you to come spend some time with me." Jason smiled, returning his uncle's hug. "Indeed, Uncle Dennis. I don't know why my mother always had issues with you, but now I'm a man. Thank you for accepting me to work at your company. Now that I've graduated, I want to follow my own path." Beatrice, who had been listening from the kitchen, felt her face flush with embarrassment. She tried to rush ahead to tidy up the room, but it was too late. Jason had already entered the room his uncle had prepared for him. The young man's laughter echoed down the hallway upon noticing the toys in the basket and the sweets on the desk. Gathering courage, Beatrice appeared at the doorway of the room. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jason," she said, her cheeks burning. "When your Uncle Dennis asked me to prepare the guest room for his nephew, I thought it was for a child. I take responsibility and will sort all this out as soon as possible." To her surprise, Jason smiled kindly. "Don't worry about it," he replied good-naturedly. "I love sweets and the toys. Well, they add a special touch to the decor." His eyes sparkled with amusement. "By the way, you haven't told me your name." "My name is Beatrice," she replied, feeling more relaxed with his friendly attitude. "If you need anything, feel free to call on me." "Nice to meet you, Beatrice. Jason said, still smiling. "I'm sure we'll see a lot of each other around here." In the days that followed, it became clear that Jason was completely different from his uncle. While Dennis was reserved and rarely spoke to the staff, Jason loved to visit the kitchen and chat with the employees as they prepared meals. He would accompany the gardener as he tended to the plants, asking questions and showing genuine interest. Jason soon discovered that Beatrice was taking a barista course and started asking her to make special coffees for him. Beatrice loved these moments, taking the opportunity to show off her newly acquired skills and chat with Jason. She was surprised at how easily she could talk to him, as if they were old friends. During these conversations, Jason shared more about his life. His parents also owned several businesses where he could easily work. However, Jason wanted to build his own path, which is why he asked his uncle for an opportunity in his company. He mentioned that his mother, Dennis's sister, didn't like the idea. For some reason Jason didn't understand. Dennis had distanced himself from the family years ago. Beatrice felt increasingly comfortable with Jason. His presence brought a lightness to the usually tense atmosphere of the mansion. She found herself eagerly anticipating the mornings, waiting for the moment he would appear in the kitchen for his coffee. Jason, on the other hand, always seemed to find an excuse to be around Beatrice, whether asking for a special coffee or simply stopping by to chat. The house cook, an experienced lady named Martha, noticed the closeness between the two young people. One day she pulled Beatrice aside, her face marked with concern. "My dear," she said in a low voice, "Jason is a very good and thoughtful young man, but be careful not to fall in love. You know he is a millionaire and the boss's nephew. You might end up getting hurt." Beatrice felt her face heat up. "No, we're just friends," she replied quickly. "I know my place in this house." But as she said this, she couldn't help feeling a pang in her heart. Was she really falling in love with Jason? On a Friday, Dennis's house was being prepared for another of his famous parties. Jason, curious, approached Beatrice as she was tidying up the living room. "What are my uncle's parties usually like?" he asked. Beatrice hesitated for a moment. "No one knows for sure," she replied. "Your uncle usually dismisses the regular staff. We know he brings in a team from other companies to work at the parties." She paused, biting her lower lip before adding, "Jason, be careful at this party." Jason frowned, not completely understanding what she meant. Before he could ask more, he noticed the smile on Beatrice's face. "You seem excited today," he commented, changing the subject. Her face lit up. "Yes, today is my barista course graduation," Beatrice replied proudly. Jason broke into a wide smile and, on impulse, warmly hugged Beatrice to congratulate her. It was the first time the two had touched each other so closely and affectionately. Without realizing it, they stayed there for a few seconds until the sound of the kitchen door opening made them abruptly pull apart. Martha entered, casting a meaningful look at the two of them. There was something there more than just friendship. That night, Beatrice was at her graduation, a small ceremony to mark the completion of the course. When her name was called, she went up on stage to receive her certificate. As she looked toward the back of the small auditorium, her heart skipped a beat. There was Jason applauding enthusiastically. Beatrice couldn't contain the smile that spread across her face. After the ceremony, Jason approached Beatrice. "And your uncle's party?" she asked, surprised to see him there. Jason smiled, his eyes shining. "Well, I had a more important commitment tonight," he replied. "Can I take you out to dinner?" The dinner was magical. The two talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. It was as if the world around them had disappeared. Afterwards, Jason took her to a viewpoint where they admired the city lights. The night air was fresh and Beatrice felt a shiver. Without saying anything, Jason placed his jacket over her shoulders. On the way back to Beatrice's house, a comfortable silence hung between them. When they arrived, Jason parked the car and turned to her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, as if trying to memorize every detail of each other's face. Slowly, Jason leaned in, and with a tenderness that made Beatrice's heart race, gave her a goodbye kiss. The next day, Beatrice didn't know how to act. The previous night had been magical, but she was still the maid in the house where Jason lived. The reality of their different social positions weighed on her thoughts. As usual, after Dennis's parties, the house was a mess. Beatrice busied herself tidying up the rooms, trying not to think about Jason or the previous night. It was then that, by chance, she overheard something disturbing coming from Dennis's office. The door was ajar and Dennis was talking to another man. "Dennis, don't you think it's dangerous? If the inspectors decide to open the shipment, they'll discover everything," said the man, with evident concern in his voice. "Don't worry," Dennis replied in a cold tone that Beatrice had never heard before. "I've already arranged everything. I'll send my nephew Jason to receive this shipment at the port. If the inspectors find anything, it will be Jason who's responsible. He's the one who will be in trouble. Neither my name nor my company's name will appear in this deal." Beatrice's heart froze. She knew she needed to tell Jason about his uncle's plans that could put him in danger, but how to do it without seeming like she was meddling in family affairs. Hours passed, and Beatrice was growing more anxious by the minute. Finally, Jason appeared in the kitchen. He looked around, making sure they were alone, and gave Beatrice a soft kiss on the cheek. "Jason, I need to tell you something about your uncle," Beatrice began, her voice trembling. "Can I come back tomorrow?" Jason interrupted excitedly. "I'm leaving now for a business trip. It's the first time my uncle trusts me to accompany a shipment." Panic gripped Beatrice. "You can't go on this trip," she said, urgency in her voice. "Your uncle is up to something, and you might end up in trouble." Jason's expression changed instantly. Confusion and resentment crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice cold. "My uncle would never put me in trouble. I trust him." Without waiting for a response, Jason left, leaving Beatrice alone with her anguish. The next day was Beatrice's day off. She spent the hours at home, her thoughts constantly returning to Jason. What might have happened? Was he okay? Guilt consumed her for not insisting more, for not finding a way to make him understand the danger. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Beatrice opened the door, her heart nearly stopping when she saw Jason standing there. He looked tired, with deep dark circles under his eyes, but there was a determined gleam in his eyes. "Beatrice," he began, his voice hoarse. "You were right. I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. I decided to look into it further and... My God, you were right. Dennis was transporting illegal goods." Beatrice pulled him inside, closing the door behind him. "What happened?" she asked, leading him to the sofa. Jason ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. "I turned in my own uncle," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "He has a huge problem to deal with now. I couldn't let that continue." Beatrice sat down beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, Jason," she said softly. He turned to her, a small smile appearing on his lips. "Well, Beatrice, I guess I'm out of a job," he said, a humorless laugh escaping. "And I think it's not a good idea for you to go back to working at my uncle's house." Beatrice nodded, the reality of the situation beginning to weigh on them. What would they do now? As if reading her thoughts, Jason continued. "How about we start a business, the two of us? A small cafe." His smile widened. "I know a beautiful young woman who knows everything about coffee." Beatrice felt her heart fill with hope and excitement. "Are you serious?" she asked, barely containing the smile that threatened to spread across her face. "I've never been more serious in my entire life," Jason replied, taking her hands in his. "What do you say? Do you want to build something new with me?" Beatrice looked into Jason's eyes, seeing in them not just love but also trust, respect, and the promise of a future together. Without hesitation, she replied, "Yes, I want to build something new with you." Jason pulled her into a tight embrace, And there, in that moment, they both knew they were at the beginning of an exciting journey. A journey that would take them far from the dark secrets and oppression of Dennis's mansion, toward a future full of possibilities. If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.